Okay guys, today I want to talk to y'all about ACT reading. In particular, which of these reading passages should you save for last? And this might be something that you've never really thought about before. You probably just thought, well, I'll start at the beginning with the first one, answer the 10 questions, and then on and on and on, all the way through the fourth one. But I will say there is a way to choose one of these to save for last. So before I give you which one of these you want to save for last, I want to go through these 4 reading passages, what they're about really quickly. In the end, it doesn't really matter that much, but a familiarity can be of service to you. The first of the 4 reading passages that you're going to see on ACT Day is called the literary narrative. And the literary narrative basically is just an excerpt, meaning a little piece of a passage pulled from like a short story or maybe a novel, or sometimes even from someone's memoir. And what makes this passage a little bit different than the others is that you have these characters and the focus is on maybe their interactions and their emotions and their dialogue and how what someone says hurts someone else's feelings and that causes them to go do this other thing, or the emotional experience of the person who's going through this hard time. So in that sense, the first one is a little bit different because of these characters and things, but the second, third, and fourth passages are similar in that they're kind of like essays being pulled out of a textbook or something. The second of the 4 passages then, and the first of these last 3 that's kind of more like an essay, is called social science. And it's going to come from the category of social science always. And you can think of social science as like social studies. So this passage might be about history. This passage might be about economics. It might be about geography. It might be about political science or something like that. But that's always going to be the second one. And I will say, if you're having a hard time keeping track of all these different literary passages and what's in them all, what they all mean, and all these little strategies and things, you don't have to take all these notes furiously. I've got a link below in the description to my free ACT Prep cheat sheets. You can find those at theactsystem.com/cheat. The third ACT reading passage will always come from a category called humanities. And that might not be something you're very familiar with. I don't think the word humanities is something that you use very often, but humanities is just an academic category, if you will, that includes things like philosophy. So this could be a reading passage about philosophy. It could be about culture. It could be about language. It could be about art of all kinds. So you could have a passage about an artist or the travels of a travel blogger or something and all the art that they experience along the way, or about a certain sculptor from history, those kinds of things. And the fourth passage is always going to come from the category of natural science. And in a way, if you're taking the ACT science test, this is kind of like the beginning of that, because your brain has to kind of click into the science mode, because this essay or passage is always going to be about chemistry or earth science or geology or physics or zoology. It could be anything, but it's always going to come from the category of what you would usually think of when you think of the word science. Now, I said a second ago that this first passage, the literary one, is very different, usually in character or in kind, from these last 3. Because the last 3 are kind of like we said, essays from a book or from a textbook or something, whereas the first one being pulled from a book or a novel or a short story is going to feature these characters and things. One thing that's important to note about these final 3 is that usually they're going to be filled with lots and lots and lots of details. So think about a history textbook. If you just opened up to a random page in your history textbook and you started reading about Abraham Lincoln, it's going to be so detailed and it's going to be impossible for you to remember all those things. So just remember to read quickly and maximize your time on the questions. However, the title of this video and what I led with is, which of these should you save for last? And this isn't something that a lot of ACT tutors are talking about. It's not something that I really have the time to teach, and even in my own live classes. It's the kind of thing that takes you, if you want to maximize your ability or your chances in the ACT reading test, it's something that you have to kind of put into practice on your own and really think about. And the reason for this is because the passage that you should save for last is the one that you find to be the most difficult. And this isn't the only ACT reading strategy that there is. A lot of people want to save what's called the paired passage for last, and we'll talk about that in another video. But it all kind of boils down to this, and this makes sense. If you are running out of time in ACT reading, which is just about everybody, let's say, for example, that your most difficult subject there is the literary passage, the first one out of the 4, and you just do much better with those final 3 that are more like something you read in a textbook. So the first one with the characters and the interactions and the emotions and those kinds of literary things are not your cup of tea. It's something that you have a difficult time reading through. You don't really understand what's going on. Let's just say that that's the case for you. In that kind of a situation, one thing you might want to consider is starting with the second passage, then the third, then the fourth, then with whatever remaining time you have, go back to the first one. And the reason is because if you are, like we said, running out of time, and you always seem to only have 5 minutes left or 6 minutes left for that final passage, well, we don't want to spend 10 minutes, if you will, or 9 minutes on a passage that we're not going to do very well on anyway. It would be much better for us to use those chunk pieces of time on the second, the third, and the fourth passages, because it's much more likely that we're going to maximize the number of questions we get correct there compared to if we spent 9 or 10 minutes on the literary passage. Now, in an ideal world, you would perfectly spend 8 minutes and 45 seconds on the 4 passages, especially because they're all of equal length. That to me is the greatest goal to shoot for. But, everybody's different. And if you're in that situation where, hey, I just can't seem to have more than 5 minutes left on the final passage, then save your most difficult one for last. Make sure especially to get questions right that refer to individual paragraphs or individual lines or individual words. And I think that will give you the best chance of maximizing your ACT reading score. So for the ACT system, this is Philip Martin. God bless.